when was the first time you streamed a movie or some other multimedia production?
So when I first streamed for my own personal viewing, you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm pretty sure in summer of 2011, that was when I first got a free trial of Netflix that I did not keep, but I think that was my first experience with it. Unless you count YouTube, which I discovered maybe 4 years before that, and that was at the point where it's a different internet connection, and so you couldn't stream a lot at once at one time, but since become more accessible. So now I use YouTube all the time.
Okay. So have you ever been a part of a streaming production?
Most recently, in my previous job, I worked for a nonprofit in Cleveland, and the nonprofit was right next to a church, which is where we took the sermons from that church and distributed them on the radio and the internet. And while I was working there, they started streaming those church services. And so I was up in a control room with a director and a couple other technicians, engineers, and not just directing the cameras, but also making sure that it got streamed on Facebook and a couple others, like the church website and our nonprofit's website. And I guess I wasn't as much involved in the streaming aspect as much as the lighting camera aspect, but it was a complex thing because a lot of things had to be in place, and you had to make sure you were running on time and you had the right connection and addresses and things like that. It was complicated.
Okay. So do you use Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, and or Amazon Video? And if so, how often?
Sure. I do not have a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime account, mostly because I know that if I did, that's where all my free time would go, and I don't want to do that. I do have YouTube, however, and Vimeo. I use YouTube a lot, mostly like podcasts, reviews, things like that, that I can not just watch, but kind of have as audio in the background while I make dinner, do prepare papers and things like that. And sometimes that can be distracting. Other times it's like, you're getting information while you're doing something, and it's interesting. And I definitely have to be. I'm really thankful for things like the tools on the iPhone that I have that say, this is how much time you spent on this app per day, and it keeps me accountable. Like, okay, too much time, I need to maybe put my phone away, delete the app for a little bit before I can go back on. You have to be really careful about that, especially because, again, as opposed to 12 years ago when I had to limit myself on YouTube just because of internet connection, now it can be really unlimited, and you have to be careful to limit yourself because of, health reasons, storage reasons, things like that.
Have you seen streaming affect traditional movie providers for both good or bad?
Sure. I think in the film industry today, there's definitely a battle between do we want to watch movies in a theater or versus do we want to watch them on a streaming service at home? And there's pros and cons to each. And I definitely see a battle between, movies are, look around these films that maybe you see that I have hanging up in my office. They are made for a big screen, and their cinematography and performances, they are made to be seen on this epic scale because they're telling epic stories. And to see something like that on a computer screen at home, it just loses the effect. And however, that also means if you see a movie on streaming, you don't have to, frankly, drive 30 to 40 minutes in a town like Cedarville to go see a movie at a theater. You can just watch it at home. And so, frankly, there are a few movies on Netflix, coming out on Netflix in a couple months that I'm looking forward to seeing somehow, and it might not be at the theater. It might be, on my, on a Netflix account or my fiance's Netflix account. And for me personally, I have to be careful as a videographer of being aware, where is my content going? Because very rare. I mean, never has any video I produced, other than maybe, you know, in my own undergrad experience, been shown on a big screen. It's usually been shown on, you know, on. I mean, the biggest screen maybe is like at a church or, you know, a pastor's conference or something, but mostly it's on a computer, it's on a phone, it's on a tablet, and so you approach it differently and you shoot differently. And you just have to know who your audience is and how they're going to consume your content, and make creative decisions based on that.
Do you think we are better off for having such convenient access to TV?
Personally, I'm leaning towards no. I think because it's content that's convenient to see is often convenient to make, which doesn't mean you get great quality content. You know, you can shoot a lot of very like big viral hits on your phone that get seen on YouTube, but you know, 10 years from now, are people going to care? You know, there are movies around me, even here in this office, that were made decades ago, and people still care. And so I think even we, you know, living in a world where you can produce and distribute content like that, we have to be careful about like what kind of stories we're telling and what tools we're using to do that. Because even though maybe it's convenient and quick, it's not honoring the Lord. It's not telling something that can stick with people and you know, inspire people. So I have to be careful with that.
All right, we have one more question. Where do you think streaming will go from here? Like, is there anything in the future that might change streaming?
I mean, recently, there's so many competitors now of whose streaming service do you get, you know, not just Netflix or Hulu, but Disney Plus and whatever Apple's doing. I'm sure other, you know, production film companies are going to have their own streaming service with their own content. And it's going to become, you know, more like, you know, it's a lot of money that adds up. And so are people in, you know, in a few years even going to be burnt out on all these streaming services, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to just pay all these rates for all these different content, but like, where are they going to turn? Is everybody just going to go to Netflix or something? I don't know. And being somebody who doesn't really use it often, I mean, I use YouTube and Vimeo, and those are at a free level. So it's a different level of what kind of content you get and how often you use it. And I don't know. And frankly, I don't know what the future is in terms of like my own content. You know, what kind of, do I utilize things like Vimeo on demand, or try to get, you know, a short film on Netflix, for example. It really, again, comes down to knowing who your audience is and how we want our stories to affect people. And so no matter, you know, what streaming service gets created, no matter if, you know, someday it's not out of the question, you know, in-home 3D or holographic, you know, video content, I'm sure somebody's going to think of it and create it someday. But the art of storytelling doesn't change.
Do you have any final remarks to make?
I really don't. I mean, frankly, I will go see, you know, a movie like The Irishman or Marriage Story that is going straight to Netflix. I know they're getting theatrical releases even for a couple weeks, and I'm going to go see them in the theater if I can, because I respect, you know, I want to see them, you know, on a bigger platform in an environment that is conducive to, you know, you're being immersed in a story and you're spending time with characters for a couple hours or a few hours. I'd rather see them at the theater than Netflix. And you know, if it gets to the point where, you know, on my computer is the only place where I can see movies, it's going to be like, you know, it's frankly going to be kind of a disappointment. So I hope we don't go that way, frankly.